Hello, welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. As you can see, half of my dad is right there. Say hi. And my big brother Ben is also right there, so is Daniel. He just disappeared. And then, so my brother might be doing a joke today. My sister is going to be doing the synopsis, but before all of that, my daddy is going to be doing the Bible. Thank you, Kimmy, for doing all the texts. Thank you, Kimmy, for doing all the texts again. And my dad's on the phone, so.
Hello?
Yeah, my brother's texting. Oh.
Who's this? Oh, yeah, you've got the wrong number.
Oh.
All right. Okay, bye.
And here's
All
Daddy.
right. Yay, we got a phone call. Sorry. You just dropped the phone. No, it fell. The phone fell down the stairs. Oops. I hope it's not broken. Okay. So, all right, I've got lots of text messages. I've got a notification that the live stream is going. Rebecca says, hey guys. So here we are. We're going to try this again. Sorry about dropping the phone. We got a phone call from Beto O'Rourke. It's going to be a great live stream. I can tell already. And it was a wrong number. I am so glad because you know what? We just don't share much ideologically between us and Beto. All right. So wrong number. And you know, I mean, the phone rings so rarely. I just felt like maybe I should answer it. But here is Genesis 19, which is what we're going to start with today. And so we are one chapter behind still. And so we're going to read 2 today. All right. Genesis chapter 19. This is the English Standard Version. You can follow along if you click on the link that I just posted in the comments. The 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, my lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way. They said, no, we will spend the night in the town square. But he pressed them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house, and he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house. And they called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them. Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after them, and said, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you please. That's not a very good parent right there. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. But they said, stand back. And they said, this fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. Now we will deal worse than with them. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break the door down. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both great and small, so that they wore themselves out groping for the door. Then the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of this place. For we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against his people has become so great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Remember, Abraham talked God down to if there were 10 people, God wasn't going to destroy it. But guess what? He's going to destroy the town. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law who were to marry his daughters, Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, Up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. So there are actually exactly 4 people that are rescued from the city of Sodom, and God didn't make that deal. He made the deal for 10. So if Lot could have rounded up 6 friends, but he didn't. But he lingered, Lot lingered. So the men, these are the angels, seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. And as they brought them out, one said, Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away. And Lot said to them, Oh, no, my lords. Behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life, but I cannot escape to the hills lest this disaster overtake me and I die. Behold, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved. He said to him, Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there. Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. So Lot likes living in cities. He likes the city life. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord, and he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley. And he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. Now Lot went up out of Zoar and lived in the hills with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to live in Zoar. So he lived in a cave with his 2 daughters, and the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come in to us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drunk with wine, and we'll lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she arose. The next day the firstborn said to the younger, Behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine again tonight also. Then you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day. And now, Genesis chapter 20, Abraham and Abimelech. This is, again, the English Standard Version of the Bible. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb and lived between Kadesh and Shur, and he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said to Sarah, his wife, She is my sister, and said of Sarah, his wife, She is my sister. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. Remember, she's 99 years old. Now Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, She is my sister, and she herself said, He is my brother? In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands I have done this. Then God said to him in the dream, Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours. So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called on his servants and told them all these things. And the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What did you see that you did this thing?" What did you see? Abraham said, "I did it because I thought there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is the kindness you must do me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother.' Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male servants and female servants and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, 'Behold, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you.' To Sarah he said, 'Behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are vindicated.' Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and also healed his wife and female slaves so that they bore children, for the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife." And at this time, that's the end of chapter 20, we are going to have the synopsis. Are we doing the joke of the day? Did JJ announce the joke of the day? The phone is ringing. Thank you. Oh, your phone is ringing. Is that what you're saying? Oh, we might do the joke of the day. Well, here's Daniel.
Okay, so why does everybody like a snowman?
You want to build? Okay, never mind. All right, Kimberly, we've got the synopsis. You actually already gave this synopsis. Why don't you go ahead and do it again so that we can remember? Because it has been a long time since we read.
It's been one night since I did the synopsis, though.
Yeah, but it's been a long time since we read.
So what happened in the last chapter was Atreyu, he got caught trying to steal Oren. Then he got banished along with Falkor. And then Bastion, the person who is like, the person who he got from the person, I forget her name. I keep forgetting names, sorry.
Zayad.
Yeah, her. Zayad.
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 Because they can't hear me.
Right. You can't hear him. So, Zayad, she said, hey, if the childlike empress wasn't there, she said, hey, if the childlike empress isn't here, then she might be like retiring and making you the childlike emperor. So he went along with the idea.
I think it's pretty real.
Yeah, no.
Childlike emperor, Bastion for childlike emperor. Woo woo! Okay.
Okay, so then what happened was Bastion, he was like, okay. So he said in front of a big crowd, in 41 days, I'm going to be coronated the childlike emperor of Fantastica.
Was it 41 days?
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yep.
That number?
Yep.
I can't remember even my telephone number.
So then what happened was he ordered a bunch of people to make a way up to the Magnolia Pavilion, except they couldn't even make a dent, and every ladder they tried to make broke. So they worked on that for 41 days, and then when he was the day he was supposed to be crowned the childlike emperor, there was an uprising, and a whole bunch of people, followed by Atreyu, went over to steal Orin from him. So then what happened was, it looked like the rebels were going to win until Bastian and Atreyu started fighting. What happened was, Atreyu, he pulled his sword out of the sheath on his own accord, and the many-colored death said something would happen.
You mean you or Bastian?
Yeah, Bastian, sorry, I'm getting him mixed up now. So Bastian, he pulled his sword out of his sheath, and it turned black. And he hit Atreyu, and Falcor went up and grabbed him, and the rebels retreated. That's practically what happened.
All right. So now let's find out the answer to Daniel's joke of the day.
Forgot the joke. 1 second.
No. Why does
Do you
everybody
wanna
like
build
a
it?
snowman? Because he is so cool.
Snowmen are cool. Bow ties are cool. Orange gems are cool too. That's why I've got my orange gem on, because it's cool. So we were actually talking about the decorating. Of course, we've been in this house for about, since January. And so we've got the Neverending Story picture here. And what we're going to do, oh, Rebecca says, so cool, so cool. But she's not talking about me. She's talking about, so what we're going to do is we're going to move this picture when we start the next book to here so that you can remember that we've been reading that. We should get a Lion Witch in the Wardrobe picture, and maybe we'll put it over here. So we'll move it over here, and then the next book, we'll put that picture right there so that we always have that one be the current picture, and then this wall, which we haven't figured out what to do with yet, we're going to put pictures of the books that we've already read. And so you'll be able to see some of them while we're reading. And I think that might be kind of fun. I did not mean to send that. Whoops, parking in the garage. All right. Let's learn about parking in the garage and the Nintendo. And gosh, I don't even know what that is. It is possible to delete comments if you don't mean to do that. Okay, so we are on chapter 23, which is called The City of the Old Emperors. Why are you trying to go in my room? I don't know either. All right, The City of the Old Emperors. The first letter is W. We're going to try to hit 2 chapters today, so I'm going to read as fast as I can. We have exactly 50 pages left of this book, and if we hurry and speed read, maybe we can finish it tomorrow. I don't know, though, for sure. We'll see. All right. I rambled too much. That's the reason why we can't read more than 1 chapter in a day. All right. While Bastian was racing through the pitch-black night miles ahead, his companions were still making preparations for departure. Most were exhausted, and none had anything approaching Bastian's strength and endurance. Even the armored giants on their metallic horses had a hard time getting started, and the foot sloggers couldn't manage to fall into their mechanical tramp, tramp, tramp. Zaid's will, which moved them, seemed to have reached the limits of its power. Her coral litter had been devoured by flames. A new conveyance had been built out of the shattered weapons and charred planks from the ivory tower, but it looked more like a gypsy wagon than a litter. The rest of the army hobbled and shuffled along as best they could. Even Hicreon, Isbald, and Hydorn, who had lost their horses, had to hold one another up. No one spoke, but they all knew they would never be able to overtake Bastian. On he galloped through the darkness, his black mantle flapping wildly in the wind, the metallic limbs of his gigantic horse creaking and grinding at every movement. At the great hooves pounded the earth, as the great hooves pounded the earth. Gap! Cried Bastian. Gap! Gap! The horse wasn't running fast enough for him. He was determined to overtake Atreyu and Falcor at all costs, even if it meant riding this metallic monster to its death. He wanted revenge. He would have attained the goal of all his wishes if Atreyu hadn't interfered. Bastian had not become Emperor of Fantastica, and for that he would make Atreyu repent. The joints of Bastian's metallic steed ground and creaked louder and louder, but still it obeyed its rider's will. Bastian rode for hours and hours through the endless night. In his mind's eye, he saw the flaming ivory tower. Over and over he lived the moment when Atreyu had set the point of his sword to his chest, and then for the first time he asked himself why Atreyu had hesitated. Why, after all that had happened, couldn't he bring himself to strike Bastian and take Oren by force? And suddenly Bastian thought of the wound he had inflicted on Atreyu and the look in Atreyu's eyes as he staggered and fell. Bastian put Seconda, which up until then he had been clutching in his fist, back into its rusty sheath. In the first light of dawn, he saw he was on a heath. Dark clumps of juniper suggested motionless groups of gigantic hooded monks or magicians with pointed hats. And then, suddenly, in the midst of a frantic gallop, Bastian's metal steed burst into pieces. Bastian lay stunned by the violence of his fall. When he finally picked himself up and rubbed his bruised limbs, he found himself in the middle of a juniper bush. He crawled out into the open. The fragments of the horse lay scattered all about, as though an equestrian monument had exploded. Bastian stood up, threw his black mantle over his shoulders, and with no idea where he was going, started walking in the direction of the rising sun. Where are you going, Dan? Where are you going? Do, 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 do. But a glittering object. JJ, I need you to come back. I'll wait. But I don't think that was appropriate. But a glittering object was left behind in the juniper bush, the belt Gehemel. Bastian was unaware of his loss and never thought of the belt again. Ilwan had saved it from the flames for nothing. A few days later, Gehemel was found by a blackbird who had no suspicion of what this glittering object might be. She carried it to her nest, but that's the beginning of another story that shall be told at another time. At midday, Bastian came to a high earthen wall that cut across the heath. He climbed to the top of it. Behind it, in a crater-like hollow, lay a city. At least the quantity of buildings made Bastian think of a city, but it was certainly the weirdest one he had ever seen. The buildings seemed to be jumbled every which way without rhyme or reason, as though they had been emptied at random out of a giant sack. There were neither streets nor squares, nor was there any recognizable order, and the buildings themselves were crazy. They had front doors in their roofs, stairways which were quite inaccessible and ended in the middle of nowhere. Towers slanted, balconies dangled vertically. There were doors where one would have expected windows, and floors in place of walls. Bridges stopped halfway as though the builders had suddenly forgotten what they were doing. There were towers bent like bananas and pyramids standing on their tips. In short, the whole city seemed to have gone mad. Then Bastian saw the inhabitants, men, women, and children. They were built like ordinary human beings, but dressed as if they had lost the power to distinguish between clothing and objects intended for other purposes. On their heads they wore lampshades, sand pails, soup bowls, waste paper baskets, or shoe boxes. Their bodies were swathed in towels, carpets, big sheets of wrapping paper, or barrels. Many were pushing or pulling handcarts with all sorts of junk piled up on them, broken lamps, mattresses, dishes, rags, and knickknacks. Others were carrying enormous bales slung over their shoulders. The farther Bastian went into the city, the thicker became the crowd, but none of the people seemed to know where they were going. Several times Bastian saw someone dragging a heavily laden cart in one direction. Then, after a short time, doubling back, and a few minutes later, changing direction again. Everybody was feverishly active. Bastian decided to speak to one of these people. What's the name of this place? The person let go of his cart, straightened up, scratched his head for a while as though thinking it over. Then he went away, abandoning his cart, which he seemed to have forgotten. But a few minutes later, a woman took hold of the cart and started off with it. Bastian asked her if the junk was hers. The woman stood for a while, deep in thought. Then she too went away. Bastian tried a few more times, but received no answer. Suddenly he heard someone giggling. "No point in asking them," said the giggler. "They can't tell you anything. One might, in a manner of speaking, call them the know-nothings." Bastian turned toward the voice and saw a little gray monkey sitting on a window ledge, or rather on what would have been a window ledge if the window hadn't been upside down. The animal was wearing a motorboard with a dangling tassel and seemed to be busy counting something on his fingers and toes. When he had finished, he grinned and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting, sir, but there was something I had to figure out." "Who are you?" Bastian asked. "My name is Argox," said the little monkey, lifting his motorboard. "Pleased to meet you. And with whom have I the pleasure?" "My name is Bastian Balthazar Bucks." "Just as I thought," said the monkey, visibly pleased. "And what is the name of this city?" "It hasn't actually got a name," said Argox, "but one might, in a manner of speaking, call it the city of the old emperors." "Old emperors?" Bastian repeated with consternation. "Why, I don't see anybody who looks like an old emperor." "You don't?" said the monkey with a giggle. "Well, believe it or not, all the people you've seen were emperors of Fantastica in their time, or wanted to be." Bastian was aghast. "How do you know that, Argox?" The monkey lifted his motorboard and grinned. "I, in a manner of speaking, am the superintendent here." Bastian looked around. Not far away, an old man had dug a pit. He put a lighted candle into it, then shoveled earth over the candle. The monkey giggled. "What would you say to a little tour of the town, sir, to get acquainted, in a manner of speaking, with your future residents?" "No," said Bastian. "What are you talking about?" The monkey jumped up on his shoulder. "Let's go," he whispered. "It's free of charge. You've already paid the admission fee." Bastian obeyed the monkey's orders, though he would rather have run away. He grew more miserable with every step. He watched the people and was struck by the fact that they didn't talk. They were all so busy with their own concerns that they didn't even seem to see one another. "What's wrong with them?" Bastian asked. "Why are they so odd?" "Nothing odd about them," said Argox. "They're just like that, in a manner of speaking, or rather, they were in their time." Bastian stopped in his tracks. "What do you mean by that? Do you mean that they're humans?" Argox jumped up and down on Bastian's shoulder. "Exactly," he said gleefully. Bastian saw a woman in the middle of the street trying to spear peas with a darning needle. "How did they get here? What are they doing here?" "Oh, there have always been humans who couldn't find their way back to their world," Argax explained. "First, they didn't want to, and now, in a manner of speaking, they can't." Bastian looked at a little girl who was struggling to push a doll's carriage with square wheels. "Why can't they?" he asked. "They'd have to wish it, and they've stopped wishing. They used up their last wish for something else." "Their last wish?" said Bastian, going deathly pale. "Can't a person go on wishing as long as he pleases?" Argax giggled again. Then he tried to take off Bastian's turban and pick lice out of his hair. "Stop that!" Bastian cried. He tried to shake the little monkey off, but Argax held on tight and squealed with pleasure. "No, no," he chattered. "You can only wish as long as you remember your world. These people here used up all their memories. Without a past, you can't have a future. That's why they don't get older. Just look at them. Would you believe that some of them have been here 1,000 years and more?" but they stay just as they are. Nothing can change for them because they themselves can't change anymore. Bastian watched a man who had lathered a mirror and was starting to shave it. Once that might have struck him as funny, now it made him break out in goose flesh. He hurried on and soon realized that he was going deeper into the city. He wanted to turn back, but something drew him onward like a magnet. He began to run and tried to get rid of the bothersome gray monkey, but Argax clung fast and even spurred him on. Faster, faster! Bastian stopped running. He realized that he couldn't escape. You mean, he asked, gasping for breath, that all these people here were once emperors of Fantastica? Or wanted to be? That's it, said Argax. All the ones who can't find their way back. They try sooner or later to become emperor. They didn't all make it, but they all tried. That's why there are two kinds of fools here, though the result, in a manner of speaking, is the same. What two kinds? Tell me, Argax. I have to know. Easy does it, said the monkey, giggling as he tightened his grip on Bastian's neck. The one kind gradually used up their memories, and when they had lost the last one, Auron couldn't fulfill their wishes any more. After that, they came here, in a manner of speaking, automatically. The others, the ones who crowned themselves emperor, lost all their memories at one stroke. So the same thing happened. Auron couldn't fulfill their wishes anymore because they had none left. As you see, it comes to the same thing. Here they are, and they can't get away. Do you mean that they all had Auron at one time? Naturally, said Argax, but they forgot it long ago, and it wouldn't help them any more, the poor fools. Was it, Bastian hesitated, was it taken away from them? No, said Argax. When someone crowns himself emperor, it simply vanishes, obviously, because how, in a manner of speaking, can you use the Moonchild's power to take her power away from her? Bastian felt wretched. He would have liked to sit down somewhere, but the little gray monkey wouldn't let him. No, no, our tour isn't done. The best is yet to come. Keep moving. Bastian saw a boy with a heavy hammer trying to drive nails into a pair of socks. A fat man was trying to paste postage stamps on soap bubbles. They kept bursting, but he went on blowing new ones. Look! Bastian heard the giggling voice of Argax and felt his head being twisted by the monkey's little hands. Look up there! It's so amusing! Bastian saw a large group of people, men and women, young and old, all in the strangest clothes. They didn't speak. Each one was alone with himself. On the ground lay a large number of cubes, and there were letters on all 6 sides of the cubes. The people kept jumbling the cubes and then staring at them. What are they doing? Bastian whispered. What sort of game is that? It's called the Jumble Game, answered Argax. He motioned to the players and cried out, Good work, children, keep at it. Don't give it up. Then, turning back to Bastian, he whispered in his ear, They can't talk anymore. They've lost the power of speech, so I thought up this game for them. As you see, it keeps them busy. It's very simple. If you stop to think about it, you'll have to admit that all the stories in the world consist essentially of 26 letters. The letters are always the same, only the arrangement varies. From letters, words are formed. From words, sentences. From sentences, chapters. And from chapters, stories. Now take a look. What do you see there? Bastian read. HGIKLOPFMWEYVXQ. That was line 1. And I'll just say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 lines. So I'm not going to read all those letters to you, but you can imagine if you were reading this book to yourself, there's a big jumble of letters there. All right, there you go. Yes, of course, said Argax with a giggle. It usually makes no more sense than that. But if you keep at it for a long time, words turn up now and then. Not very brilliant words, but still words. Spinach cramp, for instance, sugar brush, or nose polish. And if you play for 100 years or 1,000 or 100,000, the law of chances tells us that the poem will probably come out. And if you play it forever, every possible poem and every possible story will have to come out. In fact, every story about a story, and even this story about the two of us chatting here, it's only logical, don't you think? It's horrible, said Bastian. I wouldn't say that, said Argax. It depends on your point of view. It keeps these people, in a manner of speaking, busy. And anyway, what else can we do with them in Fantastica? For a long time, Bastian watched the players in silence. Then he asked under his breath, Argax, you know who I am, don't you? Of course I do. Is there anyone in Fantastica who doesn't? Tell me one thing, Argax. If I had become emperor yesterday, would I already be here now? Today or tomorrow, said the monkey, or next week. One way or another, you'd have ended up here. Then Atreyu saved me. You've got me there, the monkey admitted. But if he had succeeded in taking the gem away from me, what would have happened then? The monkey giggled again. You'd have ended up here, in a manner of speaking, all the same. Why? Because you need Alrun to find the way back. But frankly, I don't believe you'll make it. The monkey clapped his little hands, lifted his mortarboard, and grinned. Tell me, Argax, what must I do? Find a wish that will take you back to your world. After a long silence, Bastian asked, Argax, can you tell me how many wishes I have left? Not very many. In my opinion, 3 or 4 at the most, and that will hardly be enough. You're beginning rather late, and the way back isn't easy. You'll have to cross the Sea of Mist. That alone will cost you a wish. What comes next? I don't know. No one in Fantastica knows what road you people must take to get back to your world. Maybe you'll find yours Minraud. That's the last hope for people like you. But I'm afraid that for you, it's, in a manner of speaking, too far. But that as it may, be that as it may, you will, just this once, find your way out of the city of old emperors. Thanks, Argax, said Bastian. The little gray monkey grinned. Goodbye, Bastian Balthazar Bucks. With one leap, Argax vanished into one of the crazy houses. He had taken Bastian's turban with him. For a while, Bastian stood motionless. He was so stunned by what he had just heard that he couldn't decide what to do. All his plans had collapsed at one stroke. His thoughts seemed to have been stood on end, like the pyramid he had seen. What he had hoped was his ruin. What he had feared, his salvation. At the moment, only one thing was clear to him. He must get out of this insane city and never come back. He started through the jumble of crazy buildings. He soon discovered that it was much harder to get out than to get in. Time and time again, he lost his way and found himself back in the center of the city. It took him all afternoon to reach the earthworks. Then he ran out into the heath and kept going until black night, as black as the night before, forced him to stop. Exhausted, he collapsed under a juniper tree and fell into a deep sleep. And while he slept, the memory that he could once make up stories left him. All night He had the same unchanging vision before his eyes. Atreyu, with the gaping wound in his chest, stood there looking at him in silence. Awakened by a thunderclap, Bastian started up. Deep darkness lay all around him, but the massive clouds that had been gathering for days had been thrown into wild disorder. Lightning flashed, thunder shook the earth, the storm wind howled over the heath, and the juniper trees were bowed to the ground. Rain fell in dense sheets. Bastian arose and stood there, wrapped in his black mantle. The water ran down his face. Lightning struck a tree directly in front of him and split the gnarled trunk. The branches went up in flames. The wind blew a shower of sparks over the heath. In a moment they were doused by the rain. The crash had thrown Bastian to his knees. He dug into the earth with both hands. When the hole was big enough, he unslung the sword Secanda and put it in. "Secanda," he said, "I'm taking leave of you forever. Never again shall anyone draw you against a friend. No one shall find you here until what you and I have done is forgotten." He filled in the hole and covered it over with moss and branches, lest anyone should discover it. And there Secanda lies to this day, for not until far in the future will one come who can wield it without danger. But that is another story and shall be told at another time. Bastian went his way through the darkness. Toward morning the storm abated, the wind died down, and there was no other sound than the rain dripping from the trees. That night was the beginning of a long, lonely journey for Bastian. He no longer wished to return to his traveling companions or Zaid. Now he wanted to find the way back to the human world. But he didn't know how or where to look for it. Was there somewhere a gate, a bridge, a mountain pass that would take him back? He had to wish for it, that he knew, but he had no power over his wishes. He felt like being driven. No, he felt like a diver who is searching the bottom of the sea for a sunken ship, but keeps on being driven to the surface before he can find anything. He also knew that he had few wishes left, so he was careful not to use Orin. He was determined to sacrifice his last few remaining memories only if he felt sure that this would help him get back to his world. But wishes cannot be summoned up or kept away at will. They come from deeper within us than good or bad intentions, and they spring up unannounced. And so, before he knew it, a new wish arose within him, and little by little it took its form. For days and nights he had been wandering all alone, and because of being alone, he yearned to belong to some sort of community, to be taken into a group, not as a master or a victor, or as any special sort of person, but merely as one among many, perhaps as the smallest or least important, provided his membership in the community was unquestioned. And then one day he came to a seacoast, or so he thought at first. He was standing on the edge of a sheer cliff, and before him lay a sea of congealed white waves. It was some time before he realized that these waves were not really motionless, but were moving very slowly, that there were currents and eddies that moved as imperceptibly as the hands of a clock. He had come to the sea of mist. Bastian walked along the cliff. The air was warm and slightly damp. There was not the slightest breeze. It was early morning, and the sun shone on the snow-white surface of the fog, which extended to the horizon. He walked for several hours. Toward noon he espied a small town some distance from the shore. Supported by piles, it formed a sort of island in the sea of mist. The long arching bridge connecting the town with the rocky coast swayed gently as Bastian crossed it. The houses were relatively small. The doors, windows, and stairways all seemed to have been made for children, and indeed the people moving about the streets were no bigger than children. though they all seemed to be grown with men with beards or women with pinned-up hair. As Bastian stood, as Bastian soon noticed, these people looked so much alike that he could hardly tell them apart. Their faces were dark brown like moist earth, and they looked calm and gentle. When they saw Bastian, they nodded to him, but none spoke. Altogether, they seemed a silent lot. The place was humming with activity, yet he seldom heard a cry or a spoken word. And never did he see any of these people alone. They always went about in groups, if not in crowds, locking arms or holding one another by the hand. When Bastian examined the houses more closely, he saw that they were all made of a sort of wicker, some crude and some of a finer weave, and that the streets were paved with the same kind of material. Even the people's clothing, he noticed, their trousers, skirts, jackets, and hats were of wickerwork, though these were artfully woven. Everything in the town seemed to be made of the same material. Here and there, Bastian was able to cast a glance into the artisans' workshops. They were all busy weaving, making shoes, pitchers, lamps, cups, and umbrellas of wickerwork. But never did he see anyone working alone, for these things could be made only by several persons working together. It was a pleasure to see how cleverly they coordinated their movements, and as they worked, they usually sang some simple melody without words. The town was not very large, and Bastian had soon come to the edge of it. There he saw hundreds of ships of every size and shape. The town was a seaport, but of a most unusual kind, for all these ships were hanging from gigantic fishing poles and hovered, swaying gently over a chasm full of swirling white mist. These ships, made of wickerwork like everything else, had neither sails nor masts nor oars nor rudders. Bastian leaned over the railing and looked down into the sea of mist. He was able to gauge the length of the stakes supporting the town by the shadows they cast on the white surface below. At night, he heard a voice behind him say, the mists rise to the level of the town. Then we can put out to sea. In the daytime, the sun reduces the mist and the level falls. That's what you wanted to know, isn't it, stranger? Three men were leaning against the railing beside Bastian. They seemed gentle and friendly. They got to talking, and in the course of this conversation with them, Bastian learned that the town was called Skull, or Basketville. Its inhabitants were known as Skulnari. The word meant roughly the partners. The three were mist sailors. Not wishing to give his name for fear of being recognized, Bastian introduced himself as someone. The three sailors told him the Skulnari had no names for individuals and didn't find it necessary. They were all Skulnari, and that was enough for them. Since it was lunchtime, they invited Bastian to join them, and he gratefully accepted. They went to a nearby inn, and during the meal, Bastian learned all about Basketville and its inhabitants. The Sea of Mist, which they called the Skadan, whatever, was an enormous ocean of white vapor, which divided the two parts of Fantastica from each other. No one had ever found out how deep the Skadan was, or where all this mist came from. It was quite possible to breathe below the surface of the mist and to walk some distance on the bottom of the sea near the coast, where the mist was relatively shallow, but only if one was tied to a rope and could be pulled back. For the mist had one strange property. It fuddled one's sense of direction. Any number of fools and daredevils had died in the attempt to cross the Skadan alone and on foot. Only a few had been rescued. The only way to reach the other side was in the ships of the Skulnari. The wickerwork from which the houses, implements, clothing, and ships of Skull were made was woven from a variety of rushes that grew under the surface of the sea not far from the shore. These rushes, as can easily be gathered from the foregoing, could be cut only at the risk of one's life. Though unusually pliable and even limp in ordinary air, they stood upright in the sea because they were lighter than the mist. That was what made the wickerwork ships mist-worthy, and if any of the Skalnari chanced to fall into the mist, his regular clothing served the purpose of a life jacket. But the strangest thing about the Skalnari, so it struck Bastian, was that the word I seemed to be unknown to them. In any case, they never used it, but in speaking of what they thought or did, always said we. When he gathered from the conversation, that the three sailors would be putting out to sea that night, he asked if he could ship with them as a cabin boy. They informed him that a voyage on the Skadan was very different from any other ocean voyage because no one knew how long it would take or exactly where it would end up. When Bastian said that didn't worry him, they agreed to take him on. At nightfall, the mists began to rise, and by midnight they had reached the level of Basketville. The ships that had been dangling in midair were now floating on the white surface. The moorings of the one on which Bastian found himself, a flat barge about 100 feet long, were cast off, and it drifted slowly out into the sea of mist. The moment he laid his eyes on it, Bastian wondered what propelled this sort of ship, since it had neither sails nor oars nor propeller. He soon found out that sails would have been useless, for there was seldom any wind in the Skadan, and that oars and propellers do not function in mist. These ships were moved by an entirely different sort of power. In the middle of the deck there was a round, slightly raised platform. Bastian had noticed it from the start and taken it for a sort of captain's bridge. Indeed, it was occupied throughout the voyage by 2 or more sailors. The entire crew numbered 14. The men on the platform held one another clasped by the shoulders and looked fixedly forward. At first sight, they seemed to be standing motionless. Actually, they were swaying very slowly in perfect unison in a sort of dance, which they accompanied by chanting over and over again a simple and strangely beautiful tune. At first, Bastian regarded this song and dance as some sort of ceremony, the meaning of which escaped him. Then, on the third day of voyage, he asked one of the 3 friends about it. Evidently surprised at Bastian's ignorance, the sailor explained that those men were propelling the ship by thought power. More puzzled than ever, Bastian asked if some sort of hidden wheels were set in motion. No, one of the sailors replied. When you want to move your legs, you have only to think about it. You don't need wheels, do you? The only difference between a person's body and a ship was that to move a ship, at least 2 Skalnari had to merge their thought powers into one. It was the fusion of thought powers that propelled the ship. If greater speed was desired, more men had to join in. Normally, thinkers worked in shifts of 3, the others rested, for easy and pleasant as it looked, thought propulsion was hard work, demanding intense and unbroken concentration, but there was no other way of sailing the Skadan. Bastian became the student of the mist navigators and learned the secret of their cooperation, dance, and song without words. Little by little, in the course of the long voyage, he became one of them. During the dance, he felt his thought power merging with those of his companions to form a whole, and this gave him a strange and indescribable sense of harmony and self-forgetfulness. He felt accepted by a community at one with his companions, and at the same time, he totally forgot that the inhabitants of the world from which he came and to which he was seeking the way back were human beings, each with his own thoughts and opinions. Dimly he remembered his home and parents, but nothing more. His wish to be no longer alone had come true, but now, deep in his heart, a new wish arose and began to make itself felt. One day it struck him that the Skalnari lived together so harmoniously, not because they blended different ways of thinking, but because they were so much alike that it cost them no effort to form a community. Indeed, they were incapable of quarreling or even disagreeing because they did not regard themselves as individuals. Thus, there were no conflicts nor differences to overcome, and it was just this sameness, this absence of stress that gradually came to pall on Bastian. Their gentleness bored him, and the unchanging melody of their song got on his nerves. He felt that something was lacking, something he hungered for, but he could not yet have said what it was. This became clear to him sometime later when a giant mist crow was sighted. Stricken with terror, the sailors vanished below the deck as fast as they could, but one was not quick enough. The monstrous bird swooped down with a cry, seized the poor fellow, and carried him away in its beak. When the danger was past, the sailors emerged and resumed their song and dance, as though nothing had happened. Their harmony was undisturbed, and far from grieving, they didn't waste so much as a word on the incident. "Why should we grieve?" said one of them when Bastian inquired. "None of us is missing." With them, the individual counted for nothing. No one was irreplaceable because they drew no distinction between one man and another. Bastian, however, wanted to be an individual or a someone, not just one among others. He wanted to be loved for being just what he was. In this community of Skalnari, there was harmony, but no love. He no longer wanted to be the greatest, strongest, or cleverest. He had left all that far behind. He longed to be loved just as he was, good or bad, handsome or ugly, clever or stupid, with all his faults, or possibly because of them. But what was he actually like? He no longer knew. So much had been given to him in Fantastica, and now, among all these gifts and powers, he could no longer find himself. He stopped dancing with the mist sailors. All day long, and sometimes all night as well, he sat in the prow, looking out over the Skadan. At last the crossing was completed, and the mist ship docked. Bastian thanked the Skalnari and went ashore. This was a land full of roses. There were whole forests of roses of every imaginable color. A winding path led through the endless rose garden, and Bastian followed it. Chapter 24, I think we're going to have to read tomorrow. That one was pretty long, is called Dom Aeola. The first letter, as many of you may have already guessed, is X. So we will leave that story for another time, but same place, probably sometime around the same time tomorrow night. And I hope that you are enjoying the video, and I hope you're enjoying the story, and God bless you. I can wait a couple of minutes to make sure that the live stream catches up with you and doesn't just click out. So do let me know whenever you're done. Oh, wait, no, I want to not do that. Okay. And hi, Kim. So let me know what you think of the picture plan that we have. I think that when we read 20,000 Leagues, we're going to get a submarine window. So that sounds like a cool idea. Excuse me, like a cool idea to me. So anyway, we're at an hour now, and It is definitely too late to start a new chapter, but I hope that you all are enjoying everything that we're reading about. We do have 3 chapters to go, X, Y, and Z, and hopefully we get to finish it on, because I always hate ending on the second to last chapter, so hopefully we get to finish it all on Wednesday. And God bless you, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Good night.